Hey, how's it going? Welcome to another MLittleProgramming tutorial. In today's video, we will be looking at classes in Python. So what is a class? A class is a definition of an object. Every object that is created from code is created from a class. Classes hold information about objects, and classes can be seen as blueprints to create objects. An example of a class could be a vehicle. Vehicles have certain properties. For example, cars and lorries are instances of vehicles. Cars and lorries have different properties. However, they inherit some properties from a vehicle. So let's go into more detail on this. Cars, lorries, and for example bikes all have wheels. So a property of a vehicle could be that they have wheels. However, cars, lorries and bikes may all have a different number of wheels. Cars generally have 4 wheels, bikes generally have 2 wheels, and lorries may have up to 18 wheels. So even though they inherit some similarities from a vehicle, they have differences between them. Most of the differences between cars, lorries and bikes have to do with how many of a certain property they have. So for example, a car probably has a greater top speed than a bicycle. Or, as we just mentioned, a car has more wheels than a bicycle. But there are also some properties that are directly inherited. So, for example, a car, a lorry, a bike, or a bicycle all have the idea that they can move. A vehicle is only a vehicle if it can move. In this idea of classes, we can create instances or objects of vehicles, or we can create subclasses of a vehicle. So a car can be a subclass of a vehicle that can inherit all or some of the characteristics of the class above it, and this class that is above it is called a superclass. So in this case, the vehicle is a superclass, and a car, lorry or bike could be the subclass. Subclasses can also define their own methods and variables that are not part of the superclass. This structure or relationship between class and subclass is called a class hierarchy. So how do we define classes in Python? Well, we use the class keyword. So we type class, and then next to it, we define the name of the class we want to define. So for this video, we'll use the example of creating a vehicle class. So we can call it vehicle. Now, you'll notice I used a capital to start the word vehicle, and that's because it is the convention in Python and in many other languages to capitalize the first letter of a class. Now, a class, to be valid, has the requirement of having something inside of it. If you don't know how you're going to define your class yet, you can simply type the word pass. And this makes our class valid, and this program would run. However, we want to give our class some meaning. All classes have a function called init. This is always executed when the class is being initiated. We use the init function to assign values to object properties or other operations that are necessary to do when the object is being created. So let's define an init function for our vehicle class. We define it like any other function by typing def and then init. The first parameter value of any function of a class in Python is the self parameter. You can call this parameter anything you like, but most commonly it is called self. The self parameter is a reference to the value of the current instance of a class and is used to access, for example, variables inside the class. Inside this function, we're going to assign some values to some properties that every vehicle has. Every vehicle has a name, and so we assign the name by typing self.name. And we can assign this to name, and then have that as a parameter. So we always are going to be passing in a name to the vehicle class when we try to create an instance of it, which we'll see in a moment. Let's create an object of the vehicle class. To do that, we assign an object like a variable. So we can call our object v1, or vehicle1, then call the vehicle class, so vehicle, then we can pass in our vehicle name, so we can call it a car. We can also output the name of our vehicle by typing print and then our object that we want to find the name of, so v1, and the name of that vehicle. And when we run this now, we see that the name of our v1 vehicle is car. We can also define methods inside of our class. For example, we may want to find out whether our vehicle is full of fuel. We define a method inside of our class like so. We're going to call our class fuel tank full. Again, our first parameter is self. Now, we realize here our vehicle class needs more properties. So our vehicle needs a fuel capacity, which again will equal the capacity we pass in to our init function, and it will also need fuel level, the current level that our fuel is at. And we can pass these variables in as parameters at the top of our init function. Now, we don't need to pass in fuel level or fuel capacity into this function because we can find their values off of the self property. Now, inside of this function, we just want to check whether fuel level is equal to fuel capacity. And so we find fuel level on the self parameter, and we ask whether that is equal to self.fuel level. If fuel capacity is equal to fuel level, we want to print vehicle is full and return true. So now if we come back into our object and we say the fuel capacity is 10 and our current fuel level is 10, we can now just call fuel tank full on our v1 object. And when we run that, it gives us vehicle is full. With objects, we can also create a second object. So we could create a v2 object that is a vehicle. And we may want to say this vehicle is, again, a car, but this time the capacity is 10, but our current fuel level is 9. And so when we call fuel tank full on our v2 object, nothing is printed. With objects, we can also modify the properties of an object after we've initially created them. So for example, we may want to now say that vehicle 2 is actually full of fuel. And so to do this, we simply type the object name and the property we want to edit. So we want to edit the current level of fuel. And we can now set that equal to 10, which is the capacity. And so now when we call fuel tank full on our v2 objects, our vehicle is now full. Alongside being able to modify the property values, we can also delete them entirely. To do this, we use the delete keyword, and then the object we want to delete the property off of, so v2, and we can say we want to delete the name property. And so now when we print the name of our vehicle 2, we see that this object has no attribute name because we've just deleted it. Thank you for watching the video this far. I hope you got a lot of value from it. If you'd like to see more Python programming tutorials, there will be a link in the description down below to a playlist of Python programming tutorials. With that said, if you like the video, if you could drop a like on the video, it would be much appreciated as it really helps the channel, and subscribe to see new Python programming tutorials every week. Also, if you've got any questions about the video, drop a comment down below and I'll get back to you. Have a great day.